The transport ship Galaxy's Edge shook as it came out of hyperspace. Through the thick metal windows, Hannah could see the biggest space station she had ever seen. Nexus 7 stretched across the darkness like a metal city. Thousands of lights blinked on its surface. Ships moved around it like tiny insects. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked the alien sitting next to her. It looked like a giant lizard with blue scales and 4 arms. Its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Hannah nodded. "Yes, it's very big." The alien laughed, showing sharp yellow teeth, big enough to break small humans. "I am Cadet Vextel of the Helix Empire. You look very young to be here." "I'm 18, Hannah said quietly. She was small, even for a human. Girl, her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. Her uniform was clean, but looked too big for her thin body. 18. Vextel's 4 eyes went wide. "Most cadets here are at least 25, and you're so... ... He looked her up and down. Tiny. Other aliens on the transport ship started looking at her. A massive creature covered in gray fur and standing. 9 feet tall snorted. "Humans," it growled. "Why did they even let your kind into the Academy?" "You break if we breathe too hard." Hannah said nothing. She had heard this before. The transport ship landed with a loud thud. The door opened with a hiss. Hannah grabbed her small bag and followed the other cadets outside. The moment she stepped onto the station, she felt heavy. The gravity here was stronger than Earth's. Her legs felt like lead. Around her, the other cadets moved easily. The big furry aliens seemed to float. The crystal people moved like dancers. Even the lizard-like Helix walked without trouble. Only Hannah struggled with each step. "Move faster, human," shouted a voice. A huge alien in a military uniform stomped toward them. It had gray skin like stone and scars all over its face. "I am Commander Vexstar. You are all worms. But some worms are smaller than others." The commander stopped right in front of Hannah. She had to look up to see his face. He was nearly 10 feet tall and as wide as a tree. His breath smelled like metal and smoke. "What is your name, tiny worm?" "Hannah? Sir Hannah?" He yelled so loud that Hannah's ears hurt. "Tell me, Hannah, why should I waste my time training something that looks like it will break in half during warm-up exercises?" The other cadets started laughing. Hannah felt her face get hot, but she kept her voice steady. "Because I passed the same tests they did, sir." Commander Vexstar's eyes went narrow. "Did you? We will see about that." Turned to face all the cadets. "You are here to become the best soldiers in the galaxy. Most of you will fail. Some of you will quit. A few of you might die. If you survive, you will join the Galactic Defense Force." He started walking, and the cadets followed. Hannah had to take 2 steps for every one of his. Her legs already hurt. "The Academy has trained warriors from every strong race in the galaxy," the commander continued. "Vorthok fighters who can crush tanks with their bare hands, Helix warriors who move faster than light, Zephyrian soldiers who can become invisible, crystal beings who can cut through metal with their bodies." He stopped again and looked back at Hannah. "And now we have humans. Soft, weak, slow humans who think they belong with real warriors." More laughter from the other cadets. Crystalline girl with sharp edges and glowing blue light inside her body whispered to her friend, "Look at her. She's already sweating just." From walking, the crystal girl was right. Hannah was breathing hard. Sweat ran down her face. They kept walking. They entered a huge room filled with training equipment. Machines that looked like torture devices. Weights that were bigger than cars. Obstacle courses that went up to the ceiling. Everything looked designed to hurt people. "Time for your first test," Commander Vexstar announced. "Physical assessment. We will see what you're really made of." The first test was strength. Each cadet had to lift a metal bar loaded with weights. The big furry aliens lifted it easily over their heads. The Helix cadets used their forearms to make it look simple. Even the crystal people, who looked thin and fragile, lifted the bar without trouble. Then it was Hannah's turn. She grabbed the bar with both hands. It was cold and rough. She pulled as hard as she could. The bar didn't move. She tried again. putting all her strength into it. The bar lifted an inch off the ground before falling back down with a loud crash. 0 points, Commander Vexstar said with a nasty smile. The human fails. Next was the speed test. Cadets had to run around a track as fast as they could. The Helix cadets moved so fast, they were just colored blurs. The furry giants took huge steps that covered massive distances. The crystal people seemed to glide across the ground. Hannah ran as fast as she could. Her lungs burned. Her legs felt like they were on fire. She finished last, far behind everyone else. 0 points, the commander said again. The last test was endurance. Cadets had to hang from a bar for as long as possible. The first alien hung there for 20 minutes before dropping down. Others lasted 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 8 minutes. Hannah grabbed the bar. Her hands hurt immediately. The metal dug into her soft human skin. She hung there, counting seconds in her head. 1 minute. Her arms felt like they were being pulled off her body. 3 minutes, her hands were slipping. She fell. 2 minutes and 43 seconds, Commander Vexstar announced. The worst score of the day. Congratulations, human. You're officially the weakest cadet in Academy history. The other cadets laughed louder than before. Someone shouted, "Send her home before she gets hurt." Another voice said, "Humans don't belong here." But one person wasn't laughing. Park Minho, another human cadet, walked over to Hannah. He was tall and strong-looking, with kind eyes. "Don't listen to them," he said quietly. "You did better than they think." Hannah looked at him with confusion. "Better? I got 0 on 2 tests. Minho smiled. "You finished. That's more than they expected." That night, Hannah sat alone in her small room. The walls were gray metal. The bed was hard. Through the tiny window, she could see space and stars. She pulled out a small device from her bag, showed a hologram of Earth. But this wasn't the green and blue planet from old pictures. This Earth was brown and gray. Huge scars covered the surface where wars had been fought. Cities were broken. Mountains had been cut in half. This was the Earth that humans had defended for 300 years. Against aliens who were stronger, faster, and smarter. Against enemies who had better weapons and more soldiers. Against creatures who thought humans should be wiped out, but humans had survived. They had won. Hannah turned off the hologram and lay down on the hard bed. Tomorrow would bring more tests, more failure, more laughter. But she would be there, just like her people had always been there when things looked impossible. Outside her window, the stars looked cold and distant. But they didn't scare her. Nothing scared her anymore. 3 weeks had passed since the first day. Every morning, Hannah woke up with new bruises. Every night, she fell asleep exhausted. The academy was harder than anything she had ever imagined. Commander Vexstar seemed to enjoy making her life difficult. During combat training, he always picked the biggest, strongest aliens to fight against her. During running exercises, he made her carry extra weight. During weapon practice, he gave her the heaviest guns. The weak must work twice as hard to keep up, he would say with his ugly smile. But some are too weak to keep up at all. The other cadets had stopped laughing at her. Now they just ignored her. It was worse than the laughter. Why, single quotes Ara? The crystal girl with sharp edges was the worst. She was tall and beautiful, with blue light flowing through her transparent body. She came from a rich family on the Helix home world. Everything was easy for her. "I don't understand why they let humans in," Zethra said during breakfast. She was talking to her friends, but loud enough for everyone to hear. They can't fight. They can't run. They break if you touch them. What's the point? Her friends, twin crystal beings named Crix and Vex, nodded. "My father says humans are only good for cleaning and simple work," said Crix. "They shouldn't pretend to be warriors." Hannah kept eating her food. It tasted like plastic, but she needed the energy. Park Minho sat across from her, his face angry. "Ignore them," he whispered. "They're just scared." "Scared of what?" Hannah asked. "I don't know yet, but people don't hate what they're not afraid of." Later that day, something changed. Commander Vexstar announced a new type of training. "Today, we start combat simulations." He shouted at the assembled cadets. "We will face computer enemies in different battle situations, These are not games. The computer can hurt you, just like real enemies. If you die in this simulation, you fail the academy. The cadets were divided into teams. Most species formed groups with their own kind. The big furry Vorthax stayed together. The Helix Crystal people made their own team. Fast-moving lizard aliens grouped up. Hannah found herself with the leftover cadets that nobody wanted. There was Kim Daeho, a thin human who was good with computers but terrible at fighting. There was also Morden, a peaceful alien from the Trilarian race. Trilarians looked like tall, thin humans with purple skin and large eyes. They hated violence and only joined the academy because their planet was forced to send someone. Great, muttered Daeho, the reject team. We can do this, Hannah said quietly. Morden's big eyes looked sad. I do not wish to hurt anyone, even computer enemies. Then don't hurt them, Hannah said. Help us think. The simulation began. The teams were placed in a virtual city under attack. Computer enemies came in waves, hundreds of them. Most teams immediately started fighting, using their natural abilities and training. The Vorthok team charged straight at the enemies, roaring and smashing everything in their path. They were strong and brave, but many of them got hurt quickly. The Helix team, led by Zathera, used precise attacks and good coordination. They moved like dancers, cutting through enemies with their sharp crystal bodies. The lizard team used their speed to hit and run, striking fast and disappearing before the enemies could fight back. But Hannah's team did something different. Don't fight them head-on, she told Daeho and Morden. Watch how they move. What patterns? Do they follow? For the first few minutes, they just observed. The computer enemies moved in predictable ways. They always attacked the strongest-looking targets first. They always came from the same directions. They had simple AI minds that followed basic rules. Daeho, can you mess with their sensors? Hannah asked. Maybe if I can get close to their communication tower. Morden, you know about psychology, right? How minds work? The purple alien nodded. All Trilarians study the mind. It is how we avoid war. Good. What scares these enemy types the most? Morden watched the computer enemies for a moment. Unknown threats. They're programmed to fear what they cannot understand or predict. Hannah smiled for the first time in weeks. Then let's be something they can't understand. Her plan was simple but strange. Instead of fighting the enemies directly, they would confuse them. Daeho would hack their communications to send false information. Morden would use his knowledge of psychology to predict their moves, and Hannah would coordinate attacks from unexpected angles. They started small. When a group of enemies headed toward the Vorthok team, Hannah's group created noise and movement in the opposite direction. The enemies got confused and split up, making them easier to defeat. When enemies tried to surround the Helix team, Daeho hacked their sensors to make them think there were threats behind them. They turned around and started fighting each other. When fast enemies chased the lizard team, Morden predicted their path, and Hannah's group set simple traps not to hurt them, but to slow them down and make them confused. The other teams started winning their fights more easily, but they didn't understand why. The enemies seemed disorganized and stupid, but the instructors were watching everything. Interesting, said a soft voice. Hannah turned and saw Instructor Kalanera, a wise-looking Trilarian with silver skin and kind eyes. She was the only instructor who had never been mean to the human cadets. What do you mean, Instructor? Hannah asked. Your team has the best survival rate. You have taken no damage. Your teammates are fighting more effectively, but you haven't fired a single shot. Hannah looked at the scoreboard. She was right. The reject team was somehow doing better than everyone else. We're not trying to be heroes, Hannah said. We're just trying to survive. The simulation ended. The Vorthok team had fought bravely but lost half their members. The Helix team had fought skillfully but taken heavy damage. The Lizard team had been fast but got overwhelmed. Only 3 teams had perfect survival rates, and Hannah's reject team was one of them. Commander. Vexstar looked at the results with confusion and anger. This must be a mistake. Run the scores again? The computer ran the numbers again. Same result. How? Demanded Zathera. You didn't even fight. You didn't need to, Hannah said simply. Fighting isn't always about being the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it's about being smarter. That evening, Instructor Kylanera found Hannah sitting alone in the academy library. It was a quiet place where few cadets went. "May I sit with you, Cadet Hannah?" Hannah nodded. The Trilarian instructor sat down gracefully. "Tell me about human military history," Kylanera said. Why? Because today, you fought like no species I have ever seen. Your people think differently about war." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "My grandfather fought in the siege of New Seoul, 10,000 humans against 100,000 Kethmori invaders. The Kethmori were stronger, faster, and had better weapons. Everyone said humans would lose in a day. What happened? The humans held out for 6 months. They used the city itself as a weapon. They made the enemies afraid of shadows. They turned the Kethmori's strength against them. In the end, the aliens gave up and left." Kalanara's large eyes grew thoughtful. "Your grandfather was a great warrior." "He never fired a shot," Hannah said. "He was a medic, but he saved more lives than any soldier." The instructor smiled. "I think I understand now. Humans don't just fight wars. You survive them." As Hannah walked back to her room that night, she noticed something different. The other cadets were looking at her strangely, not with laughter or anger, but with something else: uncertainty. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Hannah allowed herself to hope. 2 months had passed since the combat simulation. The academy was buzzing with nervous energy. Today, Commander Vexstar would announce the most feared test of all, the Iron Crucible. All the cadets stood in the main hall. The room was huge. With a ceiling so high, it disappeared into darkness. Holographic displays showed star maps and battle formations floating in the air. "Listen well, worms." Commander Vexstar's voice echoed through the hall. "The Iron Crucible begins tomorrow. For 1 month, you will command real warships in simulated galactic warfare." The cadets shifted nervously. Everyone had heard stories about the Iron Crucible. Some cadets went crazy from the stress. Others quit and went home. Few had actually died when their heart couldn't handle the pressure. "You will be divided into fleets," the commander continued. "Each fleet will have real crews, real weapons, and real consequences. If your ship is destroyed, your crew feels real pain. If you lose battles, you fail the academy. If you win," he smiled his ugly smile, "you might survive to graduation." Holographic list appeared in the air, showing fleet assignments. The strongest cadets got the best ships and crews. Zethra was assigned a fleet of advanced Helix warships with crystal-enhanced weapons. Got massive battle cruisers with enough firepower to destroy planets. Hannah's name appeared at the bottom of the list. Her heart sank when she saw her assignment. Fleet designation: Terran Defense Group ships. 12 human. Vessels outdated models crew. Human military personnel commander. Cadet Lee Hannah the human gets the scrap fleet. Laughed one of the lizard cadets. "Those old Earth ships are barely spaceworthy." "It's not fair," whispered Park Minho, who had been assigned to a mixed alien fleet. "They're setting you up to fail." But Instructor Kalanara, who was standing nearby, looked thoughtful. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "or perhaps they are giving her exactly what she needs." The next day, Hannah stood on the command bridge of her flagship, the Soul's Pride. It was an old human cruiser. Built during the war years when Earth was under siege, the walls were thick metal plates. The controls were simple buttons and switches instead of fancy holographic displays. Everything looked rough and used, but the crew was different from what she expected. "Commander Hannah," said a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. "I'm Captain Choi Woo-jin, your navigation specialist. I served in the 3rd Human Defense Fleet during the Kethmori War." A young woman with quick hands and bright eyes stepped forward. "Jang Sori, communications officer." "I was at the Battle of Luna Station." A thick-set man covered in grease from the engine room saluted. "Yu Jinwoo, chief engineer." "I kept ships running when we had nothing but spare parts and hope." Hannah realized she wasn't commanding academy students pretending to be soldiers. These were real warriors who had fought real battles and survived real wars. "Why are you here?" she asked. Captain Woojin smiled. "'Cause when we heard a human girl was commanding a fleet in the Iron Crucible, we volunteered. We wanted to see what the next generation could do. The first week of the Iron Crucible was a disaster for most fleets. The simulation was incredibly complex. Each commander had to manage supply lines, troop movements, diplomatic relations, and space battles all at once. Many cadets made simple mistakes that cost them entire fleets. But Hannah did something that shocked everyone. She spent the first 3 days doing nothing but watching, while other commanders immediately started attacking each other. Hannah's fleet stayed hidden in asteroid fields and nebula clouds. She studied every other commander's moves. She learned their patterns, their favorite tactics, their weaknesses. "Commander," said Jang Sori from her communications station, "the other fleets are calling us cowards. They say we're hiding because we're afraid to fight." "Let them talk," Hannah said calmly. "What matters is what they do, not what they say." She was learning things that the academy instructors had never taught. Zathara always attacked the strongest enemy first because she wanted to prove her honor. The Vorthok commanders always charged straight ahead because retreat was shameful in their culture. The lizard-like Helix used the same 3 battle formations because those were the ones they learned in school. Each species fought according to their nature and their culture. But Hannah had no culture of war to follow. Humans had learned to fight by necessity, not tradition. On the 8th day, she made her first move. Zathara's Crystal Fleet was attacking a Vorthok stronghold. Both fleets were focused on each other, firing massive weapons and trying to prove who was stronger. Neither was watching for outside threats. Hannah's old human ships came out of nowhere, but they didn't attack either fleet directly. Instead, they went after something else. The supply ships that kept both fleets fueled and armed, while Zathara and the Vorthok commander were having their honor duel. Hannah's ships quietly destroyed their supply lines. Within hours, both powerful. Fleets were running out of fuel and ammunition. "This is cheating," Zathara screamed over the communication channel. "You're supposed to fight with honor." "I'm supposed to win," Hannah replied simply. By the time the Crystal and Vorthok fleets realized what was happening, it was too late. They had to retreat or risk being stranded in space. Hannah's fleet captured the strategic position without firing a shot at the enemy warships. The academy instructors were stunned. In one move, the weakest fleet had eliminated 2 of the strongest from a key battle zone. "How did she know?" muttered Commander Vextar, watching the battle reports. Instructor Kellanara smiled. She watched, she learned, she adapted. Word of the supply ship attack spread quickly through the simulation. Other commanders started watching for Hannah's fleet, but that just played into her hands. While they were looking for her ships, they weren't paying attention to each other. Hannah's next victory was even more shocking. Commander Vexful, a proud lizard warrior, had the fastest ships in the simulation. His fleet could outrun and outmaneuver anyone. He had won every battle by striking fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. But Hannah had been studying him for 2 weeks. She knew he always attacked from the same direction, the path that got him in and out fastest. Knew he always targeted command ships first. And she knew he was too proud to change his tactics. When Nextful's fleet came racing toward what looked like an easy target, they found Hannah's ships arranged in a strange formation. The human vessels were spread out in a wide net with the flagship. Appearing to be alone and vulnerable, Vexful took the bait. His fast ships dove toward Hannah's flagship, just like always. But this time, the trap was ready. The moment the lizard ships committed to their attack run, Hannah's other vessels closed the net. The fast ships found themselves surrounded, with nowhere. To run their greatest strength, speed was useless in close quarters. Impossible, Stexville shouted as his fleet was systematically destroyed. "No one can catch the lightning fleet." "I didn't catch you," Hannah said over the communication channel. "I let you catch yourself." By the end of the second week, something unprecedented was happening. The Academy simulation showed that Hannah's supposedly weakest fleet was controlling more territory than anyone else. She had defeated enemies without major battles, won strategic positions without losing ships, and done it all with outdated human vessels that everyone had laughed at. But her biggest challenge was still coming. Reports reached the Academy that Apex Commander Vorthok himself was taking notice of the simulation. The legendary Vorthok warrior, who had never lost a battle in 800 years of warfare, was watching a human girl make the galaxy's best. Military cadets looked like children, and he was not pleased. On the command bridge of the Soul's Pride, Hannah stared at the tactical display showing fleet positions across the simulated galaxy. Half the enemy fleets had been eliminated or neutralized. Only the strongest remained. "Commander," said Captain Wujin quietly, "there are rumors that Apex, Commander Vorthok, might enter the simulation himself." Hannah nodded. She had heard the rumors too. "If he does, we'll face him like we faced everyone else. He's different, Commander. He's never been defeated. Ever." Hannah looked at the stars. Visible through the bridge windows, somewhere out there, real human ships were patrolling real space, protecting real people with the same old vessels and stubborn determination that had kept humanity alive for centuries. "Then it's time someone taught him what it feels like to lose," she said quietly. The crew exchanged glances. It followed this small human girl through impossible victories, and they would follow her into an impossible battle. The Iron Crucible was about to become something no one had ever imagined. The alarm woke Hannah from a restless sleep. Red lights flashed in her small quarters as Jang Sori's voice came through the communication system. "Commander, you need to get to the bridge. Now." Na threw on her uniform and ran through the corridors of the Soul's Pride. When she reached the bridge, her crew was staring at the tactical display with worried faces. "What's wrong?" she asked. Captain Wujin pointed at the screen. "Look at the fleet positions, Commander. Something has changed." Hannah studied the display. "Died." 3 weeks into the Iron Crucible, only 3 fleets remained active. Terran Defense Group controlled the eastern sectors. Commander Kethmer's massive Vorthok armada held the western territories. And now, in the center of the map, a new fleet had appeared. A fleet that shouldn't exist. "How many ships?" Hannah asked quietly. Said Yu Jinwoo from his engineering station. "All top-of-the-line Vorthok battleships. Weapons and shields better than anything in the simulation." "Who's commanding them?" The bridge fell silent. Finally, Jang Sori spoke in a whisper. "Apex Commander Vorthok himself." Hannah felt her stomach drop. Every cadet in the academy knew that name. Vorthok was the most famous warrior in the galaxy. He had conquered entire star systems, defeated enemies that outnumbered him 100 to 1. In 8 centuries of warfare, he had never lost a single battle. "Why is he here?" Hannah asked. Captain Wujin pulled up a news report on his screen. According to this, he requested permission to enter the simulation personally. He said the academy needed to learn what real warfare looks like. But Hannah suspected there was more to it. She had embarrassed too many proud alien commanders. She had won battles using tactics they called dishonorable. Someone wanted to put the small human girl in her place. "Commander," said Jang Sori, "we're receiving a communication request." "It's from Vorthok's flagship." Hannah's crew looked at her nervously. Meeting with the legendary commander could be a trap, but refusing would make her look weak and afraid. "Put it through," she said. The main screen flickered, and suddenly Hannah was looking at the most terrifying creature she had ever seen. Vorthok was massive, even for a Vorthok. His gray skin was covered in battle scars that told stories of 1,000 wars. His eyes were black and cold like deep space. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding stone. "So, you are the human child who thinks she can play war with real warriors." Hannah straightened her shoulders. Even though she was looking at him through a screen, she felt like he could crush her with his gaze alone. "I am Commander Lee Hannah of the Terran Defense Group." Vorthok laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Commander, you are a baby playing with toys. I have fought wars since before your species learned to make fire. And yet I'm still here," Hannah said calmly. The great commander's eyes narrowed. "Yes, you are still here, using coward's tricks, hiding in shadows, attacking supply ships instead of fighting with honor. Tell me, little human, where did you learn such shameful tactics?" Hannah felt anger building in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "I learned them from survival, Lord Commander. My people didn't have the luxury of honor when extinction was the only alternative." "Extinction?" Vorthok leaned forward, his massive frame filling the screen. Your soft little world was never in real danger. You humans always exaggerate your struggles. 300 years, Hannah said quietly. And that's how long the Kethmori siege lasted. They had ships like yours. Warriors like you. They said humans were weak and deserved to be wiped out. She paused. They're not here anymore, we are. For the first time, Vorthok's expression changed. Something flickered in his black eyes. Not fear, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. You think your ancestors' victories give you the right to mock real warriors? I think Hannah said that survival is more important than pride. The communication ended abruptly. Vorthok's image disappeared, leaving Hannah and her crew staring. At a blank screen? Well, said Captain Woojin, after a long moment, that could have gone better. Over the next 2 days, the 3 remaining fleets maneuvered for position. Commander Kethmer's Vorthok Armada and Vorthok's elite forces seemed to be coordinating. Out. Both fleets moved to surround Hannah's territory from different directions. They're working together, observed Jang Sori. That's not supposed to happen. In the simulation, it's happening now, Hannah said. Alahana said, the tactical display watching the enemy movements. They want to crush us between them. Can we escape? Asked Yu Jinwoo. Could try. But running would just delay the inevitable. Hannah was quiet for a moment, thinking. How much do you know about Vorthok's fighting style? Captain Woojin brought up files on his computer. He's famous for direct assault, overwhelming force applied to the enemy's strongest point. He believes that breaking an enemy's best troops will destroy their will to fight, and Commander Kethmer, young Vorthok prince, wants to prove himself, follows traditional Vorthok tactics. Charge straight ahead, never retreat, death before dishonor. Hannah smiled for the first time in days. They're both predictable. Commander said Jang Sori carefully. They have 100 ships between them. We have 12. Numbers don't always matter, Hannah said. Sometimes the bigger they are, the harder they fall. She began to plan. For hours, she studied star charts, supply routes, and communication patterns. She looked at the psychological profiles of both enemy commanders. She analyzed their fleet compositions and weapon capabilities. Finally, she had an idea. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It would probably get them all killed, but it might work. Gather the crew, she told Captain Woojin. An hour later, the entire crew of the Soul's Pride was assembled in the main briefing room. Human faces looked back at her, young and old, male and female, all veterans of wars that most aliens couldn't imagine. In 6 hours, Hannah began, we're going to do something that no one expects. We're going to attack both enemy fleets at the same time. Surprised murmurs filled the room. Commander, said one of the gunners, that's suicide. Will destroy us in minutes. Not if we do it right, Hannah said. She activated the holographic display, showing her plan. Vorthok expects us to run or hide. Kethmer expects us to pick one fleet and fight desperately. Neither of them expects us to attack when we're outnumbered 10-1. She outlined her strategy. It was complex, requiring perfect timing and coordination. Every ship would have to perform exactly as planned. One mistake would doom them all. This is insane, whispered someone in the back. Yes, Hannah agreed. But insane is what humans do best. Captain Woojin stood up. I've followed worse plans into better odds. If Commander Hannah thinks it can work, that's good enough for me. One by one, the other crew members voiced their agreement. These were people who had survived impossible battles before. They understood that sometimes the only way to win was to do something so crazy that the enemy never saw it coming, as the crew dispersed to prepare their ships. Hannah remained alone in the briefing room. She stared at the tactical display, watching the enemy fleets move into position like pieces on a chessboard in a few hours. She would either pull off the greatest upset in Academy history or become a cautionary tale about human arrogance. But as she thought about her grandfather defending New Seoul, about the 300-year siege of Earth, about all the times humans had been told they were too weak to survive, she felt something growing inside her. Not fear, it's not doubt, determination. Let's see what the great Vorthok thinks about human tactics, she said to the empty room, outside the ship's windows. Stars twinkled in the darkness, waiting to witness a battle that would change everything. The battle began at dawn. Station time Hannah stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching two massive enemy fleets move toward her small group of human ships. Vorthok's elite forces came from the north, 50 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Commander Kethmer's armada approached from the south, another 50 vessels bristling with weapons. Between them, like a tiny insect caught between two giant hammers, Hannah's fleet of 12 old human ships waited. "All ships report ready, Commander," said Captain Wujin. "Communications are clear," added Jang Sori. "Engines at full power," confirmed Yujin Wu. Hannah took a deep breath. "Begin Operation Crazy Human." That was what her crew had nicknamed the plan. It seemed fitting. The first part was the hardest. Instead of running away or choosing one fleet to fight, Hannah's ships split into 3 groups. 4 ships went toward Vorthok's fleet. 4 ships headed for Kethmer's armada. The remaining 4, including Hannah's flagship, did something completely unexpected. They flew straight toward the space between both enemy fleets. "What is the human doing?" Vorthok growled from his command ship. His tactical officers were confused. The human fleet was charging into a crossfire zone where both enemy fleets could shoot at them. "She must be insane," reported his weapons officer. "No commander would willingly enter that position." But Vorthok had lived for 8 centuries by never underestimating his enemies. "Watch her carefully. Humans don't do anything without a reason." Meanwhile, Commander Kethmer was equally puzzled. "The human ships are splitting up. They're too weak to fight either of us alone. Why would they divide their forces?" His answer came quickly. The 4 human ships approaching Kethmer's fleet suddenly changed course. Instead of attacking his warships, they went after something else entirely: his command and communication vessels. These were smaller, lightly armored ships that stayed behind the main battle line. "They're targeting our communications," shouted Kethmer, Shade. "Without those ships, we can't coordinate with Lord Vorthok." At the same moment, the 4 ships near Vorthok's fleet were doing the exact same thing. Old human torpedoes, designed for precision rather than power, struck the enemy communication arrays. Within minutes, both enemy fleets were cut off from each other. "Clever," Vorthok admitted grudgingly. "She's turned one battle into 2 separate fights." But the real genius of Hannah's plan was just beginning. With communications down, both enemy fleets had to make their own decisions. And Hannah knew exactly what those decisions would be, because she had studied both commanders for weeks. Kethmer, gung and eager to prove himself, did exactly what Hannah expected. He ordered his fleet to charge straight ahead, trying to destroy the human ships quickly before they could cause more damage. Vorthok, experienced and cautious, did what Hannah predicted. He began a systematic advance, planning to crush the humans with overwhelming force. Both fleets were now moving according to Hannah's plan, not their own. "Now," Hannah said quietly, her 4 remaining ships, still flying between the 2 enemy fleets, suddenly accelerated. But they weren't running away. They were diving toward the one thing both enemy commanders cared about most: their supply ships. Every fleet needed fuel, ammunition, and repair materials. These precious supplies were kept far behind the battle lines, protected by only a few guard ships. No sane commander would fly through crossfire from 100 enemy vessels just to attack supply ships. But Hannah wasn't sane. She was human. The Soul's Pride and her escort ships raced through the space between both fleets. Enemy fire lit up the darkness around them. Laser beams and missiles filled the void, but the old human ships were small and fast. They twisted and dodged like birds flying through a storm. "Hull damage on Deck 3, reported Yujin Wu. "Shields at 60%. Called another crew member. "Keep going," Hannah ordered. "We're almost there." They reached the supply ships. While both enemy fleets were busy chasing the other human vessels, Hannah's group systematically destroyed the fuel tankers, ammunition ships, and repair vessels that kept the massive fleets operational. "Impossible," roared Vorthok as he watched his supply line disappear. "How did they get through our defenses?" The answer was simple. He had been so focused on the human ships attacking his communications that he hadn't protected his supplies. And without communications, couldn't warn his supply ships or coordinate their defense. Commander Kethmer was having the same problem. His young pride had led him to chase the human ships that were running circles around his fleet, while Hannah quietly destroyed everything he needed to keep fighting. But the most brilliant part of Hannah's plan was still to come. With their supplies gone and their communications down, both enemy fleets were in trouble. They needed to retreat and regroup. But there was only one safe route out of the battle zone, the same narrow passage. Between two asteroid fields, both fleets headed for the same exit at the same time. Lord Vorthok called Kethmer over emergency. "Communications, your ships are blocking our escape route." "Your ships are in our way, young prince." Vorthok replied angrily. With their pride and their fleets at stake, both commanders refused to yield. The two allied fleets began pushing and shoving each other, trying to reach safety first. In their panic and anger, they started firing at each other. Hannah watched from her damaged flagship as the two massive enemy fleets tore each other apart. Vorthok's experienced warriors fought Kethmer's proud young soldiers. Ships exploded. Commanders screamed insults over the radio. Allies became enemies. Within an hour, both fleets had destroyed each other. The Iron Crucible simulation ended with a simple message: loading in space. Victory. Terran Defense Group. The Academy's main hall had never been so quiet. Of cadets and instructors from dozens of species stared at the final battle report in complete silence. The human girl with the weakest scores had defeated the two strongest fleets in Academy history. But the real shock came when Apex Commander Vorthok himself entered the hall. The massive Vorthok warrior walked slowly through the crowd. Every species represented in the Academy had legends about Vorthok's victories. He was the living symbol of military perfection. He stopped in front of Hannah, who looked impossibly small beside his towering frame. "I have conquered star systems," Vorthok said, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I have led armies that numbered in the millions. I have defeated enemies that should have been impossible to beat." He paused, looking down at the small human girl. "In 8 centuries of warfare, I have never known defeat." The hall waited. Some expected him to demand that the results be overturned. Others thought he might challenge Hannah to a real fight. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Slowly, carefully, Apex Commander Vorthok lowered himself to one knee. The gasps from the crowd echoed through the hall like thunder. "Today," Vorthok continued, "I learned the difference between being a warrior and being a survivor. Warriors fight with honor and strength. Survivors fight to win, no matter the cost." His black eyes met Hannah's steady gaze. "When extinction threatens, survival becomes the highest honor of all." He bowed his great head. "I bow not to your strength, human child, but to your species' refusal to surrender when all hope seems lost. You have shown me that true power lies not in what we can destroy, but in what we refuse to let be destroyed." The hall erupted in chaos. Some species cheered, others protested. But the message was clear to everyone the galaxy had underestimated: humanity's children. Later that evening, Instructor Kylan Ara found Hannah sitting alone in the Academy's observation deck, looking out at the stars. "What will you do now, Cadet Hannah?" the wise Trilarian asked. Hannah was quiet for a moment, thinking about her grandfather and the siege of New Sol, about Earth's scarred surface and its stubborn people, about all the humans who had faced impossible odds and somehow survived. "Whatever it takes to keep everyone safe," she said finally. "That's what humans do." Through the transparent walls, the stars shone cold and distant, but they didn't seem threatening anymore. The galaxy was vast and full of powerful species, but they had all learned something important today. Never underestimate the small human girl who refuses to give up. Somewhere among those stars, Earth continued to heal from centuries of warfare. And now the galaxy knew that humanity's children carried within them the same unbreakable spirit that had kept their species alive. When gods and monsters tried to erase them from existence, the Academy would never be the same, and neither would anyone who had witnessed the day a human girl taught the greatest warrior in galactic history what it truly meant to fight for survival.